Hi, everybody. This is Keeping Agile Coaching Non-Denominational Podcast. And I'm Cherie Silas, and I'm going to be your host today. And I have with me Diana Larsen, and our topic is the Agile Fluency conversation. You might know Diana from being in the community. She's a huge contributor of the community. She's an author, and she has spent a career helping others become more agile. So Diana, I'm going to hand this to you. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you. Well, you're right. I've been in the community for a long time. I joined in right in the very early 2000s. Got introduced to some folks in the late 1990s and joined the community very early on. And it's because I really did find a home here. I found the people who were doing the kind of work that I was also drawn to. And so it's really been my privilege to contribute some books that people have enjoyed and have said nice things about. And then also to be able to contribute by taking leadership positions, like with the Agile Alliance Board and on various conferences and those kinds of things, and speaking and starting businesses that help others do this work as well. So that's the contribution I'm proudest of. And I just feel so fortunate to have been surrounded by the community of people and community of other contributors that have moved all of our work forward together.
Yeah, and your work carries on. I hear people all the time talking about the retrospectives book. Right? You and Esther actually laid the foundation and said, this is what it looks like. Here's the model. And then your liftoff book a few years ago, right? Really, really great work. So now we're talking about this Agile Fluency conversation. And so help us to understand a little bit about, well, what does Agile Fluency actually mean?
Well, Agile Fluency is actually a model. We call it the Agile Fluency model, and it's a way of thinking about the behaviors, the kind of learned behaviors that teams of people need to accomplish in order to provide the kind of business benefits and the job satisfaction and other kinds of things like that we're all looking for to the work. And so our James Shore and I, a number of years ago, first in 2012, and then again, we updated in 2018, an article that Martin Fowler published on his website called the Agile Fluency Model. And we also have that article in the form of an ebook, because it's a little bit easier to read on mobile devices and smaller screens that you can freely download on our website. But the idea behind it is, and I love the theme of your podcast, because that's what I think. I think we all need to find, every organization, every team, every group of people that are forming a team need to find the Agile that is best fit for the outcomes that they want, for the nature of the thing they're building, for all of those things together. There are lots of approaches to doing Agile out there, to getting those benefits from Agile. And the idea that there's only one way, there's just too much diversity in business and in the kinds of, software, somebody said software's eating the world. You're hard put to find any business, any practice, any profession, any industry that doesn't rely on a software component at this point. And so it's everywhere. And we need to be doing it well. We need to be doing, and by doing it well, I mean, we create the business or organizational benefits that are needed, and we create the job satisfaction that is needed. And so that people can keep doing the work, I mean, it's kind of circular, right? So so fluency, agile fluency, I mean, it was really based on the idea of language fluency. James Shore and I were having a conversation about a workshop that we'd been presenting that was, like a lot of workshops, it got really good feedback at the end, and people had observations that we wanted to take into account. And so we were looking through the feedback and thinking about is there anything we want to tweak in this workshop, to have any way we want to improve it, make it better. And we tried a couple of different ways, and we weren't really satisfied with it. And we both had been exposed to the idea of language fluency. And that the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Language, ACTFL, kind of put, and I think there's a council like this pretty much in every language family, but had said, there's not just one way to be fluent. It really is about what you're trying to accomplish. There's a certain, you can be completely and totally fluent in the language that you need to be a tourist. You can be completely and totally fluent in the language that you need to just go live in a neighborhood and interact with your neighbors and tell stories about what happened over the weekend and that sort of thing. There's a language that you might need if you were going to be a public speaker or teach at a university, right? And so there isn't ever just one fluency in a language. There is the fluency level that is right for your usage. And so we started taking that analogy and saying, well, what about agile teams? Are there different situations that agile teams find themselves in that might require different fluent use? So in other words, different proficiencies in the skills that they need. What can they do well? What can they do? And then the definition of fluency is what you do naturally without thinking about it. Those of us that are born into a language are pretty much fully fluent because we speak that language without thinking about it. We know what the right appropriate response is in any given situation. Well, what if we thought about agile teams that way? How do we create agile teams that can know what situation they're in and then always know what the right response is and just do that with just routinely without having to stop and think about it or stretch into it or any of those kinds of things. So we started doing some research to talk to a lot of people, exposed our ideas a number of times. I love open space conferences, so we take our ideas to our regional open space conference here in the Pacific Northwest, Agile Open Northwest, and we show it to folks and say, well, what do you think? Are we on the right track? And in general, we got the response that you're on the right track, but have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And so we'd go back and we'd incorporate that into it until we got to a place where all the people we were talking to were saying, this is ready to be exposed to the public. And that's when we wrote and published the first article. And then we thought we were done.
All that just to publish an article.
Just to publish the article, but we wanted to get this idea of what does it mean to be, for a team to be fluently agile, right? And what are the sort of differences that you might, like, are you a tourist or are you living in a neighborhood? What are the differences, and then we started getting questions from folks. When we would tell them about that, or they had read the article, they'd say, well, so how do we apply this? So how do we figure out, now what, now that we have this model of this way of thinking about things, how do we apply it? What do we do with it? And so then we started thinking about that. And that's the second iteration of the article replaced the first one that's now up on Martin Fowler's website and in our ebook, reflects all that learning that we did between 2012 and 2018 about what is the actual application? How do you implement fluency in your teams and in your organizations? And it's really about, we use sometimes the analogy of riding a bus. A dear colleague, Bonnie Allman, told us this little story about a yoga class that she was in, and we borrowed it. And the idea is that when you get on a bus, you only ride it to the place where you want to get off, right?
Yes, yes.
You don't ride it all the way to the outer suburb zones where the big box stores are, if what you really wanted to do was go to your doctor's office that's just in another neighborhood in town or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the idea behind the Agile Fluency model, or, and in language fluency as well. You can stop at tourist level fluency, but if you want to go live in a neighborhood, you're still going to need that tourist level fluency skills, but then you're also going to need to be able to, have a logical conversation with the utilities provider or whatever it might be. So, so we were looking at how did that work together? And our idea is the team rides the bus. The team figures out, the team and the organization together figure out the destination. They want the team to be what zone, we call it, you borrowing bus zones. What zone of fluency does this team need? And then the team's going to ride the bus to get there. The team's going to acquire all the skills and the routine implementation of those skills to get there. But the organization has to buy the ticket. So it requires organizational investment in order to help the team get to where it needs to go, to give the business then back what they need. So it's a kind of help us help you situation, right? Mm-hmm. And it's working together. And so, and what we discovered for us was that the team behaviors were the best indicator of what was going on in the larger organizational system. How much support was the organization giving its teams in order for them to produce what was needed? And so that in general is the idea behind the model, and why we called it Agile Fluency. How do you become fluent in Agile? Well, first you have to figure out what is it you're trying to accomplish. And then when we know what you're trying to accomplish, we can identify the fluency you need to accomplish that. And then that tells us where you need to build more skilled proficiency, more mastery in your team. Yeah. And so it's not that every single person on the team needs to have all those masteries, but the team as a whole needs to be able to draw on all that mastery.
Mm-hmm. Diane, as I listen to you talk about this, some things really stick out to me. This word of fluency, right? The teams need to have fluency. What I often hear is team maturity. Yeah. And to me, that has always kind of been like, they're not children. Why are you talking about maturity, right? It doesn't make sense. So I really like this use of fluency. And the same thing with, when coaches go into a company and they're like, we're going to do agile transformation. And I don't even know that customers, clients know what that means. Right. But this concept of building fluency so you can do what you want, what you need, get where you want to be fluidly, right?
Right.
And then the last thing that I think is really huge is what I don't hear is, here's my framework, here's my box, now you
Right.
get in it, and I'm going to
Right.
cram you down in there, and I'm going to make sure that you've got everything the box holds.
Right.
And so I really, really appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is one of the things that we end up talking about a lot with the folks who come to us to learn about the Agile Fluency model and what we call the Agile Fluency Suite, all the other materials that we've built around it so that people can use it. That it really is about moving from being able to say, I'm a Scrum coach or I'm a SAFe coach, which is good. I mean, that's great. I love people learning. And so, and you can demonstrate your learning, and that's fabulous. But there comes a point at which you need to sort of move beyond that and say, I understand extreme programming. I understand Scrum. I understand SAFe. I understand DAT. I understand less. I understand, whatever the toolbox is, that the bigger toolbox is that is most most relevant to the person who wants to use those tools, and be able to say, and I know when I use a Phillips screwdriver, I'm going to keep that toolbox thing going, when I need to use a Phillips screwdriver and when I need to use a flat screwdriver, and they're both good tools, but you use them in different places. And so being able to pick and choose among the practices and among the proficiencies and among the, even I dare say it, the mindsets that are kind of inherent in each of those frameworks and methodologies, being able to say, this is, I have a nuanced view, and this is what's going to fit best in this for this team in this organization, and let's work with them from there. So start from where they are. And it makes me sad when I guess the people are always wanting to know, well, so if you're not, associated with one of these methodologies, what is your competition, or what is your, and my competition is anybody who comes in and says one size fits all. After having grown up my whole life as a woman who is a larger sized woman, I know one size does not fit all.
It does not.
It doesn't. So how do we develop the discernment that it takes to figure out, well, what is the right size here? What is the right selection and combination that fits here? And that, that takes some additional additional ways of looking at things.
Yeah. And just because you can squeeze into it doesn't mean it fits.
That's right.
Just because you can does not mean you should.
Right.
And so we're talking a lot about
and this. Actually, I'm sorry, but the opposite of that is also sometimes people put on clothes that are way too big for them, right? And they really need a smaller size.
Yes.
And that's what we're really after at the Agile Fluency Project. And what's the right configuration for you?
So we're talking a lot about fluency, and I heard you say that it's the Agile Fluency model, which tells me there's some kind of method or thinking that goes in there. So can you talk a little bit about that model piece?
Sure. And the quickest way to learn about it, I'll just tell everybody, is to go to the homepage of our website, agilefluency.org, and there's like a 10-minute video.
Perfect.
That is the quick overview of the Agile Fluency model, because it does have a lot of pieces and parts. But the idea is that we identified, again, what we call zones of fluency, 4 zones. And actually, maybe it's like 5.5 zones, because we also say, there are folks who are what we call pre-agile. They haven't just made a choice to going to go agile yet. And it may be that where they are is just fine. If they're working on some kind of software that is a repeatable process and that, they've built before and they know how to do it, some kind of phase development approach where there's only a couple of individual contributors and the manager's telling them what to do, that might fit. That might fit. We don't spend a lot of time describing that in any of the things that we do because that's not interesting to James and I.
Yes.
So where we get interested is where people say no, that no longer is sufficient for us. We actually need to try some of this team stuff, some of this cross-functional stuff, some of this, and some of this agile. And so where we start really describing is in the zones. And the first zone that we get to, we call focusing zone. And that is where a group of people really learn how to work collaboratively as a team, how to produce together, how to shift their mindset from thinking in terms of of components or of what's technically cool to what can we build that's going to return value to our customers and our business, which is a really different way of thinking about things. So that's a big kind of work culture shift to make from individual contributors building components to a group of people building according to value and according to valuable stories or whatever. So that's a shift that happens there. So we gain fluency in building together in that way. That usually means we also need to gain some fluency in working with an internal person, like some kind of business liaison, an on-site customer, a product owner, somebody who can help us as a team understand what's valuable and what's the next most valuable thing. And then we also start building in fairly small chunks. And so that we can, if we learn after we've delivered a few things, if we learn what we thought we were supposed to build isn't exactly what's going to fit the situation, and we need to redirect or refocus our energies, we can do that without having created a lot of waste. So it's building small, delivering or producing, and moving forward in that way. We need some really good basic software skills, software programming skills in that zone, but we don't have to get too fancy just yet. And then, and that actually, it ends up working pretty well in a lot of situations. And the methodologies that people often use is they go back to the Agile Manifesto and they'll say, let's create something that fits all these values, right? Or they'll pick up basic Scrum or kind of basic Kanban, depending on the nature of the work. And, kind of the fundamental pieces. We often call the focusing zone Agile fundamentals. It's like the basic idea of how you need to shift your thinking so that you can work in this new way. But that's not sufficient for everybody. So it doesn't work for everybody. So sometimes people need to ride the bus a little further.
I feel another zone coming.
Yeah, I feel another zone coming to what we call the delivering zone. And here we're actually shifting into a broader view where we're not only thinking about what we're building and making sure that it's valuable, but that we're also thinking about how does it fit in our larger organization. So now the team may have DevOps in mind or UX in mind. It becomes the cross-functionality of the team starts getting a little more diverse. And we need really good engineering skills because now we're looking at release at will. Now we're looking at continuous delivery, continuous integrate, the continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment on an as needed basis. And now we're working with our business, what we call our business representative, whether that's product management, product ownership, again, on-site customer, whoever that might be, business analysts sometimes now. We're working with them to know what kind of cadence does our market need in terms of how often they can take in new versions, new releases, what are their expectations about that? Some people want a much longer cycle. Other people want something really fast. I mean, the classic old time example of that was Flickr, who was delivering into production like 14 times a day or something like that. Now lots of folks are doing more of that. So that's the delivering zone. And it requires that the team together has, very collective coding standards, has agreed on continuous integration and how they're going to manage that. So they have to rely on those team collaboration skills that came out of the focusing zone. Those are all still needed, but now they're adding more sophisticated engineering approaches.
Yeah. So would you say the zones build on one another, or are they side by side? So they do.
They build on one another, or at least they work in tandem. What we tend to say is figure out what zone of fluency you need from your team, and then do everything you need to get there. So if you said to me in the beginning, I really need my team to be a delivering zone team, then we'd say, okay, well, there's all these skills that we would have in the focusing zone, and there's all these skills that we would have in the delivering zone, and let's just start. Mm-hmm. It takes longer if you say, okay, now let's get fully fluent in the focusing zone. Okay, now we're there. Okay, now let's start on delivering zone. That just takes longer in our experience. So we say, go for the place you want to be, but you're going to need to include a greater body of skills. And so the other thing that happens is the further along in the zones you decide is what you need, the longer it's going to take you to get there, just because of learning curves and, all that sort of thing.
So it sounds like you're saying that if I say I want to be in the delivery zone, I don't have to do everything that's possible in that zone in order to be successful. I can go as far into the zone as I want to be.
Exactly.
What's the third zone?
So then the next zone. So I just want to say, most teams that we run into, the most common is people want either focusing zone or delivering zone teams. And delivering zones are even more common than focusing zone teams in terms of what people want. What we actually see is a flip of that. In terms of what people want.
Yeah, it's like they may not know they need the focus zone, but they know they need the delivery zone. Yeah, that makes sense.
So then if people say, well, wait, this still isn't quite enough. I mean, we're delivering on a market cadence, we're releasing at will, but we need to be out there innovating. We need to be out there potentially disrupting a marketplace. Now what do we need? Well, you need optimizing zone teams. And these are kind of like the skunk works teams, the teams that really focus down on a whole product and learn that within the team, the fluency is around not only the engineering parts of that product or the software parts of that product, but everything they need to know about what their customers want and need, or their users want and need. And so that often with the shift that we talk about that happens here is there's a sort of some changes in organizational structure. Because one of the things that we see a lot is that those teams don't have enough business representation in the team to make fast decisions. So what we want from those is their ability to make decisions, to sort of own that product, know what they're going after, and maybe even have a budget that they're managing, right? And so there's business representation in the team. There might be sales and marketing representation. The group of subject matter experts grows according to what we're putting in here. And this happens in both software as a service and embedded software and hardware. I mean, these things all go together.
So Diana,
yeah.
would you say that this space is what maybe people would say like product management, business agility? Is that what's in this space?
Yeah, well, this is the interesting one, as we call this the optimizing zone. And it is the zone, what we call Agile's promise.
Oh,
It's
I like that.
the zone that a lot of people describe when they're saying, this is how you be Agile, right? Mm-hmm. But not everybody needs this much effort. And they certainly don't need this much organizational disruption, because now you've got to hire a whole lot more people who can feed that business information into the teams and make sure every team has a full-time representative. So there's no waiting. We can move really fast and there's no handoffs, right? Everything is right there. And the managers, who probably needed to change a little bit how they managed in focusing and delivering, because they need to manage teams and not individuals now. Now they need to probably be looking at managing groups of teams, and they're probably working more laterally than vertically. So managers need to be communicating with each other about what parts of what policies and procedures in the organization are getting in the way of the teams being effective. And they've got to work out the impediments at that level. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. That's hard work. And it often requires somebody with a real belief that this is the only way we're going to be successful, someone in leadership that is willing to spend their internal social capital to make it happen.
Yeah. And I hear you talk about this. One of the ways that I've kind of described this in the past is there's Scrum or Kanban adoption, right? That's what some people want. And then there's Agile adoption. So they want to bring it more into the whole culture. Right. And then there's Agile transformation, which is a whole different beast. And now it sounds like you're starting to really get into what is transformation work.
Yeah. At least into the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. Even into the beginning of it, because there's one more zone. Well, there's 1.5 more zones. But if you're in a large organization, probably if this is what you're looking at, this is the kind of potentially transformation that you're looking for, because most organizations don't start out with a structure or an organization design that fits for these kinds of teams. So adjustments must be made, right?
Yeah.
So there is one more zone after this, but these first 3 zones, they're the ones that we see all the time. Mm-hmm. The next zone is one we don't see very often, and we certainly don't see it in large organizations. It's a small organization zone, and we call it the strengthening zone, because now the teams are not just focused on their own product, they are focused on the good of the whole organization. Hmm. And that organization communication flows and such are it's possible to do that. We don't have communication overload yet. We can still know what's going on in other parts of the organization. We can still know whose product we all want to see get to market first, even though we may be working on different products at the time. And also things like, these are the organizations, and this we call the organization culture shift, that these are the organizations that are trying out new governance models. They may be inventing new practices that they then contribute back into the Agile world. A lot of the new practices have come from experiments that people were doing in smaller organizations, and and they've contributed that back. And so we see those kinds of things. Their view is bigger than just their team or their product.
Yeah.
On these teams. And we call that the strengthening zone, because their focus is in strengthening the whole.
Mm-hmm.
The one remain, but we don't see very many teams there. And so, yeah, I don't put a lot of focus there. And if you look at the graphic representation of our model, you see there's a little tail that comes out of the out of the strengthening zone.
Yeah.
And that's there to represent what else might be coming. And because we don't know that these 4 zones are the only zones that Agile is capable of. And we have seen some teams, and we're talking about teams all the way through. We have begun to see some teams that are not only not limited to their product or to their, their features of their product or their own organization, but they're beginning to look at societal, what is it that we're building that's good for the whole of society? And how do we need to organize ourselves to do that? Or how do we give back to our larger communities and those kinds of things? And so there are some teams that are beginning to adopt those ideas. And so we think there's at least one more zone emerging, but we don't have enough information about it to really describe it yet.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fascinating to listen to you talk about this model and to really see what your experience over the years has taught you. You didn't just jump in and build something to go sell it. This is actually years of experience. And so, Diana, our listeners are going to want to know, like, and what are you doing right now? And how can I get some of this?
Right.
So what would you say to that?
Well, my focus right now is primarily on, I've got a couple of writing projects going on because I always do, but most of my focus is on this Agile Fluency project and transferring, mentoring other folks into doing what we do. And so the way we're doing that right now is we have a workshop series that we do, comes out on about a quarterly basis. We've got a couple of other ones that are kind of in the planning, but right now we call it the Agile Fluency Facilitators Workshop. And that is the workshop that helps people move from a more narrowly focused Agile coaching practice, which is, they could be quite expert in, to more of the idea of being a consultant or change agent, either an outside consultant change agent or an internal change agent that has the broader view about how to introduce their ideas into the organization and so on. And then we give them all the Agile Fluency materials. We call it the Agile Fluency Suite, the Agile Fluency materials and other tools that we've developed over time that they can then get a license in. And, the best way to discover about that is to look at our website. We have a page called Become a Facilitator. And we also have a page that lists our workshops and events that are coming up. And so people can read more about things there. One of the things that's a real pleasure to me in all of this is when people earn the license, and we've had more, well over 100 people have gone through our program at this time. But when someone earns a license, then part of that license to use the materials also comes with the opportunity to speak to their trainer or to me or to Jim sometimes when he's available, and just arrange for a half an hour of mentoring, kind of on call, as mutually convenient. And so I get to have all these amazing conversations with people who are out there using our materials and using other people's materials too. It's how I learn about things like Wordly mapping and things that aren't a part of our world, our scheme, but are also opening up the world. And and I, find like things like team topologies and the Agile Fluency model just really blend well together. So there's a lot out there that I'm excited about, and that I get to learn about from the people who've been through our program, and then I get to, give give them a little gentle nudge. I wouldn't say I'm not a career coach or a professional coach in that way, but I have served more of a mentoring role at this point in my career.
Yeah.
And so we just have wonderful conversations about what people want and need and where they want to go. It's great.
Well, Diana, it's been really fascinating to talk to you about this and to hear your vision and your work with people, and really just that your contributions continue, and you're really equipping people in this agile space to be successful. So I thank you for that. And this has been wonderful talking to you. And this is Cherie Silas with your Keeping Agile Coaching Non-Denominational podcast. Goodbye.